training, yoga practice, Tai Chi, and stress reduction techniques. She has published numerous articles in her field and has spoken at medical conferences, women's and parents groups, medical schools, and high schools. She is also the representative of Congregation Zichron Mordechai in Teaneck, where she resides with her family as a proud mother and grandmother, and is actively involved in communal organizations like Yachad and Bikur Cholim. Basi, I know we can use every bit of advice you have to offer about how to make sure we are coping and taking the time to take care of ourselves during this crazy and difficult time. So thanks so much for being here, and we can't wait to hear from you and learn from you.
Okay, have you made me co-host so I can share my screen?
Yes, you are co-host.
I'm co-host. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, good evening, everybody. It is truly my pleasure to be here this evening and hopefully to share some ideas with you. I hope, that you'll come away with something. I wish I had all the answers. We're living in we're unprecedented times, but I hope you can take away something with you. What I explained to Shira was because my background in medicine, when you're in medicine, you never speak without a PowerPoint behind you. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation. Please feel free to write little notes in the chat. And at the end, hopefully when we're done with this evening, we'll have time to answer questions at the end. So if something you think about something, put it in the chat. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. Okay, so without further ado, let me just start here. Okay, so this was creating your toolbox, creating self-care in a COVID era, and hopefully, please God, soon beyond. So what is a personal toolbox? So what does that mean to create a toolbox? I want to just see if I can get rid of me here. I don't need to look at me the whole time. Let me just move everything over a little bit. Okay. So when you think about a toolbox, this is about thinking about ideas, actions, life experience, something you might have heard of, a lecture you might have heard, a story that someone might have told you, that somehow you feel like, you know what, that so has touched me in such a special way that I'm going to think about that, not just in the context in the way the speaker spoke about it, but perhaps I could use it some other time in my life. So what would that look like? So I wanted to share with you some of the things that are my personal toolbox, and I pick these 3 specific things because I think they're going to be relevant for our conversation tonight. So there's a book, and if you have not read Atul Gawan's book on being mortal, I highly suggest that you do. It is a book about really aging and the end of life in modern world. There were a lot of things about the book that were interesting, but one of the things that really spoke to me about in this book was he spoke about the fact that if we want something, that we have to sometimes sacrifice something else. So when he talked about that when we talked, actually what he spoke about was safety. So when we have little children, if we want to allow our children independence, we give up some safety, right? We allow them to get on a bus by themselves or walk to a friend's house. And when they get older, we allow them to get their driving permit and drive a car. So we sacrifice some of their safety to give them independence. At the end of life, when people are older, sometimes with an elderly parent, or when someone themselves is elderly, they have to sacrifice some independence to make sure that they can stay safe. So sometimes, and I want you to think about that thought while we're having our discussion about self-care, that will we need to sacrifice something in order to gain something? The young man in the middle is my youngest son, Yosef Dove. Yosef is a 26-year-old young man with autism, and he has many of the traits of someone with autism. He talks himself, and he often jumps up and down when he gets excited. And sometimes if you would just see him that way, you would have not any understanding of what really lies beneath the surface of that, which is a deeply spiritual person who is very connected to God and also very connected to human beings in an exceptional way. So you have to look beyond the surface of what you see. And sometimes I think that's a lesson I know I've learned from being his parent. He's changed me, not just me, but my entire family, raising Yosef, that we have been able to see sometimes, still we need work in this area, but to be able to see beyond what we're looking at. And the third book is just a book I read a long time ago, and actually was very popular in about 2000. It's a book called Who Moved My Cheese? I also highly recommend this book. It'll take you about 45 minutes to read it. It's a parable, and I won't go through the whole thing, but it's really about noticing that in your life that something has changed. And if you hold on to what you always had, and you're unable to move forward, you're unable to take a look and see how life has changed, and you hold on to your old self, that it leads to a lot of unhappiness. And I want us to think about that too right now, because sometimes I have someone who'll tell me, oh, I hate Zoom. I said, okay, but right now, Baruch Hashem, we have Zoom. Right now, life has changed. Our cheese, let's see, what we had before has moved. And so we have to figure out, how are we living in this new world when our cheese has been moved? So keep those thoughts in mind as you start thinking about, what can I create for myself that might work for me? And each one of us being individuals, what may work for you may not work for your friend. So
Asi, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We're having some issues with hearing that people are mentioning. So maybe we can just test the crowd a couple of times to make sure that people can hear you okay.
Okay, so let me do this. Let me also move
I think the microphone might even be overly sensitive. There's a lot of background.
Okay. So are they hearing background noise? Is that what we're hearing?
So it's actually, it's a bit of fading in and out. It'll be a little louder and a little quiet. Some people are saying it sounds very, just like the whole sound is very faint, even if they turn up their volume.
Okay, let me see what I can do on my end. I'm going to just I'm going to stop sharing for a minute.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Are you on a laptop?
Okay, I'm on my laptop.
Okay.
Let me just check my sound and see what I can do. I'm sorry about that. It's one of the beauties of, I'm just going to do a test here on my microphone. Okay, tell me, is that better? Is that any better?
Maybe if you could just keep speaking.
Okay, I'm going to still talk. I'll just say blah, 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 blah. No, that won't be that interesting. Okay, is that any better for everybody? How is that?
See better.
Can you tell? Is it any better? It sounds extremely far away. I don't know what to do.
I wonder, do you ever use headphones?
You know what I'm going to do? Let's do this year. I know it's not what we wanted to do. I'm actually going to switch my system. I have another system I can work with. So I know it's not what we wanted to do, but why don't we just switch directions while I do that and let...
It sounds fine now.
Does it? Do you think maybe
I hear you fine now also.
Yeah,
yes?
It's better. It's better.
Okay. Okay. All right. Here we
Okay.
go.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
okay.
I'm glad you did. I'd hate to be talking to myself this whole time. Okay.
It's perfect. It's perfect now.
Okay. All right. I'm just having trouble. Okay, where were we? Okay, thank you for sharing. I'm sorry about that. Okay, So where do we begin? So I want us to just think about this perhaps in a way you've not thought about self-care. Where does self-care really begin? It really begins with thinking about how does one feel about themselves? So there's a very basic concept in Judaism, not just in Judaism, but also in Christianity and many other religions, is that love thy neighbor as you love yourself. And we learn this as children. And I don't know if we've ever thought about that, what that means. It doesn't say we should love our neighbor more than we love ourselves, or that we should treat our neighbor better than we treat ourselves. Is that we should love our neighbor as you love yourself. There is a understanding that we would love ourselves. It's a basic understanding. Otherwise, this very basic concept in Judaism wouldn't exist, right? The idea that in order to love someone else, one must love oneself, which is something we probably don't think much of. So in Judaism, as in many places, a lot of great stories happen on trains. So many of you may be very familiar with this story, the story of the Chafetz Chaim, that the Chafetz Chaim was traveling back to his hometown. And on the train, a man came to sit down next to him, a member of the tribe, a landsman, and he sits down to talk to him. And they're chatting, and he says, "Where are you from?" And he discovers that this man is from the home of the Chafetz Chaim. He said, he asked the Chafetz Chaim, "Do you know the Chafetz Chaim? I've heard he is the most amazing person. He is a fabulous person, an inspiration. You are so blessed to be living in the same town." And the Chafetz Chaim, who was known for his modesty, said to the man, "He's not so great. He's overrated, and you heard too much about him, and it's actually not true." The man was so incensed by this man saying something negative about the Chafetz Chaim that he said, "I can't even speak to you," and walked out. And as these stories go, the man ends up in the town of the Chafetz Chaim, and the Chafetz Chaim is sitting in the front of his shul, and someone points out that that's the Chafetz Chaim. And the man is completely embarrassed. He cannot believe that this man that he spoke so rudely to was the Chafetz Chaim, and he runs over to apologize for his behavior. And the Chafetz Chaim said to him, "It is I that should apologize to you, because you taught me a great lesson. I have spoken about Lashon Hara, about speaking negatively about others, but I never spoke about what words and language do we use about speaking about ourselves. And that lesson I learned from you, that one has to be careful about the language one uses when they're talking to themselves." I see many women, mainly women. I have a few men in my practice, but I mainly see women. And sometimes it is amazing to me the language that women use about themselves. And I want you to think, even for yourself, what language do you sometimes use about yourself? And I'm thinking things that people say. I'm lazy. Descriptions about their self, the way they look, sometimes are so unbelievably negative. It's one of the things I actually call women out on, and actually we start to count how many times in a 1-hour consultation that someone will say something negative about themselves. So I want you to think about that, even about some ways that you talk about yourselves. And if you had to make a list of all the things in the world that you love, how long would it take for you to name yourself, put yourself on that list? So I ask you this question, I want you to think about it. Are you on your own list? So when we talk about self-care, you have to think, am I on my list of people that I think about taking care of? Am I someone that I think, that person deserves to be taken care of? Because without that as a foundation, you're not going to be able to find that place to care for self. So I love this one. It's just, this is the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Make sure that you spend some time really just liking yourself. And if this sounds like a little corny for some of you, trust me that I've never seen someone really be able to make a change about their personal self without feeling that they deserved that help. So when you look in the mirror, who is it that you see? So we spend as women a lot of time with this piece of it. What do we look like? And And again, a lot of it because of what culture teaches us about what beauty is, we spend a lot of time on what does that person look like. But there's the other piece of you where there's no barrier, like that all of us are made of the same organs. What lies beneath our skin? What is it that when we start getting beneath that surface, what person are we taking care of? Not just our external self, but also our internal self. So before COVID, what did we think? And I'm curious to hear, maybe you write something down in the chat about how did you define self-care prior to the pandemic? So these are things I threw down that I was thinking about if I was going to think about self-care. You know, someone might like a massage, you know, that's always nice. A vacation, I actually love the beach. I think if anything ever goes wrong, that's where I want to be, someplace warm. And I imagine that where you are, that very often right now you're thinking that a little sunshine and warmth would feel good. Sometimes just going for manicure and pedicure, just also something that we did just to make ourselves feel better. Perhaps you went out to eat with a spouse or a friend, or that you got together and you saw a movie together, you got together with a friend for coffee, or once again, you got together with either a daughter or a parent, and you got to spend some quality time with them. So right now, all of those things are not things that right now that we are able to do during the pandemic. Actually, almost none of these things are something that we can think about. I see that there are a lot of notes. I hope it's not because people can't hear me. Is the sound okay, Shira? We're still okay with the sound? Yes, okay, good. Okay, all right. But how do we define self-care during a pandemic when all of those things that we thought of as taking care of ourselves, like none of them can happen right now? So how do we take care of ourselves right now? So the truth is, I think, keep it very simple. And when I used to meet with medical students, like as they were starting their careers, I actually used to tell them the following things, that when you are taking care of people, what makes people healthy is actually pretty simple. You have to move, you have to sleep, you have to get enough fluid, you have to eat the right amount of food. I didn't add this to the slide, but you also have to go to the bathroom. That's one of the other things that makes people healthy. And you have to have meaningful relationships. You have to have friendship, intimacy, and trust. If you have these things, a person feels happy and that you can feel physically and emotionally well. When any of these things are out of whack, you don't feel well. And it has effect not just physically, but really on our emotional well-being. So when we think about self-care right now, since we don't have so many options for self-care, I want us tonight just to think about, can we keep it pretty simple? And how are we taking care of ourselves during this pandemic? So what are our barriers to self-care? And I think that the number one, and that's why I wrote it 3 times, that people feel no time, no time, no time, right? Especially those of you who are home with children, who are in, and I don't know what's happening in Montreal with the school system, that I know here where I live in New Jersey, the kids are in school, they're out of school, a kid is home because of they're on quarantine or the class is on quarantine. So many times the kids are home with parents. Parents are working from home. So they're trying to work. So no time, no time. It's very little. People feel like there's no time for self-care. People feel too stressed to think about it. They think it's an unrealistic expectation given our current living situation. They feel that self-care is selfish, that if I have so many people, my spouse, my parents, my children, my grandchildren, wherever you are in life, that people need me, taking care of myself just doesn't feel right now. Perhaps you would like to, but you feel unsupported or you don't know where to begin. So these are just some of my barriers I thought about self-care, but again, I'm curious to hear what you feel is your barrier. If I've not mentioned it, like put that in the chat. What's your barrier that you feel is preventing you from caring for yourself? So one of the things about overcoming barriers to self-care, some of you may have seen this model. This is called a change model whenever we make changes. So let's call tonight, we'd be in the pre-contemplative time. Right now we're thinking about, we want to talk about self-care, and then we'll get to the contemplation, like we're going to think, maybe we'll make a plan, maybe we'll have determination, we're like reset. We decide we're going to do something, we're going to put something in action. And very often we relapse and we're unable to maintain that. And then sometimes we get back in the cycle again. And really, you can come in and out of this circle anytime, any which way, many, many times. And if you've ever tried to change anything in your life, this is very often what it looks like. And very often I found for myself, I'll talk about myself, I end up in the pre-contemplation and contemplation state, talking about it a lot, but finally getting to action is sometimes difficult. So that's really, we want to see, can we come up with an action? So I think that this is the way many of us are feeling during this time. I'm so busy, I have no time, and there's nothing to do. So it's interesting, we have that paradox of both those things happening at the exact same time. I think when Shira, like we originally had a change in the schedule about what date we were going to do this, and she said, well, are you available? And I said, I'm not doing anything. I'm not going anywhere. I'm available. I'm available. And yet I have to say that I too feel very, very busy. And yet I very often feel like a dullness, that there's nothing to do. And, you know, we, in Judaism, we sanctify time. We're a religion of time. Everything is sanctified by time. And I think that that's very difficult for us now when time, like I wake up in the morning, and I don't know how many of you have this experience, you have to think for a minute, what day of the week is it? Forget what date it is. I think, is it Monday or is it Wednesday? Usually by Wednesday, I think it's Friday. It takes me a moment to think what day of the week it is, because everything seems the same. I'm curious to hear if you feel the same about that. Very often, I think, especially for people on both ends of the spectrum, that people who have young children at home, that Shabbos was a day you got together with friends and your kids got together with friends. And now Shabbos, which maybe been a fantastic day that you looked forward to, that sometimes now you may not look forward to Shabbos. It's a day without the phone, without the computer, that may feel a little lonely. Now, maybe everyone doesn't feel that way, but some of you might feel that way. On the flip side, if you're home and maybe you're home with a spouse and you're not seeing children, you're not seeing grandchildren, you're not seeing friends, it's a lonely time. So I would think about, as we're having our discussion about self-care, of those times that maybe used to bring us joy, can we put some sanctity or something special about those days and to think about? So I actually ran this by some of my kids about some of the things that they do to make themselves feel like special about a day. And sometimes it's about food. They have a special treat that they give themselves, or like maybe they're trying to eat very healthy, but that day they'll allow themselves a treat, or they allow themselves time to take a nap, or they'll allow themselves, no matter how cold it is, they go for a walk. And these things, again, small. We sometimes have to hold on to those small things now. So many of you know, mindfulness is a very popular phrase today. We say it a lot, that we want to live in the moment. So we want to think about what we're doing. But I threw that little line in the bottom down, just, you know, some partially for levity, but also it's a little bit true. In case it's not a good moment, I'm going to eat a cookie instead. So right now, I think sometimes we have to allow ourselves that time to sometimes eat that cookie, but to sometimes take a moment and just think about, what am I doing? What is it I want to accomplish? And to have realistic expectations about what it is we want to accomplish. So if we decide, you know what, I'm going to do yoga because I know it'll be good for me and I'll feel good. I'm going to make sure I get enough sleep every single night. And I'm only going to eat healthy food. And I'm going to become a great cook. I'm going to make my family really nice dinners. And I'm going to stay well hydrated. And I'm going to meditate every evening so I can keep myself calm. So if you're this person who can do this, amazing. But most of us regular human beings, this would be an unrealistic expectation of self, even during perfect times, but especially not now. So when you think about choosing something that you would like to do, think about choosing a thing. Where can I make a change that would be nourishing to me and that I would be taking care of myself? So the first thing, while usually when I give a talk, I usually speak about sleep last. But right now I felt like I need to change that, because I think that sleep is something we often sacrifice. Actually, I think it's the first thing we sacrifice. If we have a project for work, if we have to cook for Shabbos, if we have housework to do, if we have a presentation to do, we just go to bed later. because somehow we think that those hours we can borrow from. So just that you know what happens, and you probably do know, what happens when you don't get enough sleep. So what happens to you physically is the body needs sleep. Every creature on the planet needs sleep. God needed sleep. God rested on the seventh day. Message to man is we need to sleep. And if you get enough sleep, and those of you probably know that, if you get enough sleep, you feel like you can handle much more. The world seems less difficult. And you physically feel so much better. So emotionally and physically, you feel better. What are ideal sleeping patterns for people? Ideally, most people need about 7 hours of sleep, and that would be the general. Some people can survive on 6, letting you know nobody can survive on less than 6 hours of sleep. Very few people need more than 9 hours of sleep. Somewhere between 6 and 9 is almost everybody. Most people can get by on about 7 hours of sleep. The older you get, the less sleep you need. So, which is some great irony in life, because at some point, your body doesn't let you sleep just when you actually could sleep. When you can't get any, when you need a lot of sleep, what young women need a lot of sleep, so usually during your 20s and 30s, actually need a lot of sleep. And very often women are blessed with children at that age that don't let them sleep. So, but plan, if you can, when you're thinking about your own sleep, think, is there a way I could plan to get 7 hours of sleep at night? And see what the difference it could be in your life. So what are many of the reasons? I'm going to take our families out of the equation. What are the things that we have control over? So this is one of the things that prevents us from sleeping, is the fact that we are either we're very often people binge watch Netflix. They find something and there's something addictive about it. Facebook is addictive. The screens are addictive. And we also know that whatever signal electronics send to the brain actually not only for some people prevents them from falling asleep, but even those that fall asleep sometimes will not allow them to sleep well through the night. So one of the big things I tell people is try to get unplugged a little bit. So this cartoon is very much, I know how I was feeling. I had to stop watching the news for a little while, because while I feel I must be informed, I felt that sometimes I need to be a little less informed so I can keep my sanity. And I'm sure many of you are feeling the same way. You get inundated with especially right now, with numbers in the vaccine and who's getting the vaccine and where is the vaccine, who had side effects, there are people that want the vaccine, people wearing masks, people not wearing masks. A lot of this information actually will start talking to you at night. When I say unplugged, I want you to think about those of you who keep it's just a thought, you could do an experiment. Those of you who keep your phone next to your bed, or actually take your phone or electronics to bed. I always say your phone is not your lover. It should not be in bed with you. And to think about, if it could speak to you, to plug your phone in, not near your bed, but either in a different room or on the other side of the room. So you are not tempted to just pick it up. Know that when you pick it up, you've turned on brain waves in your head, and it'll make it more difficult to sleep. What are the other things that prevent us from sleeping? One is stress, and we all have a certain amount of stress right now. And what I call chatty brain, we call it monkey brain. It's like the brain that doesn't stop talking to you. And this is just a cute thing. It's like, hey, you're going to sleep? Yes, now just shut up. And it says, do you ever think that every sea and Pacific Ocean is pronounced differently? Right? So this kind of thinking that happens at night, that you just turn on your brain and now you're wide awake. So what can you do about it? And I know this seems very simplistic, but actually besides unplugging your phone, not watching television before you go to sleep, either to just read a book, an old-fashioned book before you go to sleep, and to do some deep breathing. It doesn't have to be complicated, but actually just taking deep breaths, even if any of you want to do it now, I actually can't see most of you because I mainly can see my slides. So if you feel up to it, you feel like no one's watching you, to just take a deep breath through your nose and blow it out through your mouth. And just simple exercise of breath to just concentrate just on breath to turn the brain off. Another small thing that you can do for yourself to care for yourself is to drink water. And I know it sounds so simple, but many people have a hard time drinking water. And you would be surprised in the improvement in how you're not just going to feel cognitively and physically. Most of us walk around dehydrated most of the day. Very often when I ask women why they don't drink water, some people just don't feel thirst. Some people don't like water. I've heard that they don't have time because they have to run to the bathroom. And you have to just think about that as women, that we don't have time to go to the bathroom. Okay, another normal, regular physiological function. If you're suffering from fatigue during the day, I want you to try an experiment, and you can always email me because I'd love to hear from you. Drink enough water and see if you feel less tired. And if you feel less foggy, especially around that 2-3 o'clock time, when you start feeling a little tired, to just drink a lot of water and see whether or not you feel clear. What is the recommendation for water? You take your body weight, you divide it in half, and then that's how many ounces or how many cups of water you should have a day approximately. Now, if you're not drinking any water at all now, that would seem like a lot of water. So what I would tell you to do is maybe just start by just increasing by 8 ounces a day and see how you feel about that, or if that helps you. Those of you who don't like water, or you want to make water a treat for yourself, like you're in a spa, since we're not going to one right now, cut up some limes, some lemons, and some cucumbers, put it in your water, and you have maybe some mint, some fresh mint, or even just stick some mint tea in there. And now you have made yourself a spa drink. So these are little ways that maybe you can help yourself. Moving the body. And again, difficult now. I love the way they dressed Wonder Woman. Not practical at all for a woman who is supposed to be a superhero. She's wearing thigh-high metal boots. Doesn't seem a good outfit for running in. Not wearing the best sports bra. Okay, her hair, no ponytail. So this is not a good way for moving well for us as women. But those of us for moving today, the gyms are closed. So if you're someone that went to a gym, or you're someone that just never really liked moving, the same thing with the response the body has to movement is sort of amazing. It releases endorphins, which are really the happy hormone that actually for most people make them feel better. And again, it doesn't have to be complicated. We don't need to get a fancy bicycle or anything like that. There are many classes now on Zoom. I give a class twice a week on Zoom. Happy to have you ladies join me. YouTube has tons of classes. Turn on some music, dance around your living room. But the body is meant for movement. You deserve to move. You will feel physically and emotionally better by just moving. You need to somehow, and I think this is probably the most complicated for most of us, to box out some private time for yourself. So how do we do that? Actually, I'm not really totally sure, but I'll give you some ideas, okay? In the beginning of my talk, I don't know how many of you could hear me, but one of the things I mentioned that in order to get something, we have to sacrifice something. So what could you give up in your life right now to be able to take better care of yourself and to give yourself some private time? One of the advantages right now, if we had to think of something positive, is one thing I think about no one's coming into my house. If I have dishes in the sink, I'm the only one that's going to know about it. If I don't vacuum today, it might bother me, but there is some comfort in knowing that no one's popping over. No one's going to see it. So if you're feeling fatigued, run down, you know what? It's okay. Give something up. I pick these. You have to think about yourself. What could you give up? What could you sacrifice so that you could give something to yourself? Divide and conquer. What I mean by that is that you have someone, especially if you have a significant other that you're with, could you, between the two of you, decide, and these are choices to be made, I need X amount of time for self. I need you to do everything else during that half hour or 15 minutes, whatever it is. And I'm then going to work out that I'm going to give that to you so that I know that I have some time for myself. Some will feel like, no, that's not what I want. We actually need time together. So again, that's a choice. So think about that. What would that work for you? And if you had to divide and conquer, what would you do during that time? So one of the things that I found very helpful during this time, I started a learning group with a group of women. We meet Motzei Shabbos now, and we're studying, and it's a non-stress group. We started studying Nechama Price's Tribal Blueprints. We read it together, so no one has to prepare, and we read it together and we discuss it. Right now we're doing, just before Purim, we're doing Rabbi Foreman's book, The Queen You Thought You Knew. Again, not complicated to study. Allows us to meet together, have conversation. We talk about other things too. A book club, if you could do that, that 1 hour is yours to maybe spend with friends. Maybe for yourself reading a book, maybe taking a yoga class, coffee or Zoom with a friend, maybe a play date with a grandchild, watching a movie or favorite show, maybe a bubble bath, or maybe for some of you, it's taking a nap. So, or maybe there are other things. You have to think about what speaks to you to give you some of that private time for yourself. Self-care is not self-indulgent. It's self-preservation. And if you can care for yourself, you will be in a completely different place to care for the people that mean so much to yourself. Make sure that you are on your own list. I want to make sure that I included this in my conversation. For those of you, this is very trying times. And if you are feeling very down a lot of the time, you should seek out help. I found out that this was something available in your community, and I put the Health Initiative hotline there. Please write it down through your community that they're available to help people that need help. Don't be, if you feel that you are feeling down or you need someone to talk to, really reach out. This is very trying times. And very often a friend that might have been there in the past right now just doesn't have the bandwidth right now to be the support. And maybe you need to go get some more professional help. That's not a friend. So if you need that, please use that time. I think I went way over my time, but I just want to, as we're ending, and please put in your chat box, what can you put in your toolbox? That what could you think about that would help you in your journey for self-care during these really trying times? And hopefully these times will be over very soon and we'll be able to get together, and you can use these toolbox, things you put in your toolbox for beyond COVID. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Bossy. You gave us so much to think about. That was so incredibly therapeutic. I don't think I'm the only one here who probably feels like you were literally speaking to me. I'm like, how did you find out everything about me before this talk? I already feel just a little lighter after hearing from you. So thank you so much for all these tools. And I just want to remind everyone to keep your questions in mind or post them in the chat, because Bossy will be sticking around and can address a few of them at the end of the program. So before I introduce Rifki, I'll just take a quick minute to tell you why I'm so passionate about the opportunity to be able to introduce the Yoetzet Halacha in our community here. When I was newly married, I lived in a number of different cities on the East Coast. And as a newlywed, I was actually the only married couple on the campus where we were living. And I was a total novice. I had many questions about the laws of Nida and Mikvah, and it was already hard to keep them. And I really didn't have a lot of support. And at the time where I was living, in order to access a Rav with that particular area of expertise, I actually had to rent a car and drive 30 minutes to the home of a rabbi I didn't know very well and ask what you can imagine were some pretty private and personal questions. And it honestly was not the most comfortable way to be observing an already challenging new set of mitzvot. So when I think back about those memories, it just highlights for me why I have such a strong appreciation now for the access we have to a Yoetzet in our very own community here. And having Rifki now here to turn to, I realized that those vulnerable exchanges don't just have to be about getting the answers to the questions we need, but can actually be really reassuring, strengthening, comforting, beautiful exchanges when we really need that support most often, when we have a Yoetzet and someone as knowledgeable and special as Rifki on the other end of our questions. And of course, as a woman, she shares a unique sensitivity and understanding of what it's like to be a woman in all those situations. So for anyone who hasn't had the pleasure of getting to know Rifki, I'll give her an introduction, a brief one, because I don't think she'd be happy with me otherwise. So Rifki hails from New Jersey and has lived here in Montreal with her husband, the rabbi of TBDJ, and their 7 children since 2016. For many, many years, she has been teaching brides, bat mitzvah girls, high school Tanakh, and regularly teaches inspiring classes to the women of our community. She is one of a select handful of women who has completed the prestigious and intensive curriculum of study through Nishmat's Miriam Glaubach Center to become a certified Yoetzet Halacha in 2019. Anyone who has met Rifki can tell in the first 5 minutes of speaking to her how incredibly warm and empathetic, knowledgeable and articulate, humble and present she is. She has an extraordinary ability to really listen and connect with the people around her. And I can personally attest to how much I hate when I have to get off the phone with her. We have been so blessed to have Rifki here as our wise and sensitive leader and teacher, as the Rebbetzin of TBDJ these past few years. And we are so incredibly fortunate to have her now serving our community as a Yoetzet Halacha, the first in Montreal. Rifki, we are so grateful you went through the rigorous training you did to get here, and we want to honor and congratulate you on this huge accomplishment. The last thing I just want to quickly say is how meaningful it is for me to be able to be involved in this initiative, and I encourage any of you who are also passionate about this or about women's learning or programming to please reach out and support, donate, not hesitate to get involved too. So thank you so much again. And Rifki, we're ready for you, but I hear unmuting. If people feel like they need to clap for Rifki, I think we might need to clap for Rifki.
Thank you so much, Shira. I don't really have words to appropriately thank you. And I want to stay within my time frame. So I'm not going to spend as much time as I would like to thank you, to thank Basi, who seems to have found her way into my brain, which was a little disturbing at first to feel that she knew what time I went to bed, knew how little water I was drinking, knew that I only ate cookies today, not a cookie, but many cookies and a bunch of other things that I won't go into. So as Shira mentioned, I am so grateful. I sincerely feel just a bit lighter than I did when you started. And I really feel that I have a path. I have a couple of short steps that I can take one at a time. But I appreciate you sharing yourself, your wisdom. It was excellent. Thank you. You'll see in the chat if you didn't get a chance to see yet, I think how much everyone appreciated what you had to say. So following up on what Basi shared with us, I was going to say the following, but of course now we're all so much calmer and happier. But since we haven't put most of those things into play yet, I'll stick with my prepared remarks. These days, I find that everyone that I speak to, some days that's a bunch of people, some days I think it's just me talking to myself. But these days I find that everyone I speak to is either very down and either really truly depressed on a clinical level or somewhere close. They're either down and sad or they're really angry and cranky, what we started calling in my house crangry. And some of us, or maybe even many of us, are sort of cycling between the two, being down and sad, and being angry and frustrated, resentful. And it's no wonder. We have been going through so many different things in our community, whether we are just overwhelmed with sadness about the things that are going on in our upside down world, whether we are mourning losses, both in our immediate circles, in our community, or to the Jewish people, to the world at large. We have lost some incredible leaders in the Jewish people just in the last 24 hours, but certainly in the last many months. It's going to take us a long time to process all of this. Some of us are mourning the fact that we just don't have a regular life anymore. We're not seeing our family and our friends. We're not able to celebrate simchas together. We're not even able to be together in our most difficult and challenging times. And then those of us, when we're either in our, angry mode or cranky mode, we are frustrated, beyond frustrated, whether it's with the federal government for not procuring enough vaccines and the rollout has been a disaster, or with the provincial government, or with the local authorities and deciding what they're implementing or not, or maybe it's those people over there who are not being careful, or the people who went away, or the people who stayed, or we are just completely burdens. We are heavy with these feelings.
Oh God.
And what I realized yesterday What I realized yesterday is this is not who we are. This is not who we are. It's not who we're supposed to be, not as a Jewish people, but in particular, this is not who we are as Jewish women. And I am grateful that this event, even though the date got moved and changed, but that it fell out today, when just yesterday, we as the Jewish community, the Jewish people, whether we were at home or in synagogue or aware or not aware, the Jewish people marked a very significant day yesterday, and that we read the Torah portion that describes the splitting of the sea. And as we know, the story, the famous story goes, the Jewish people are standing in front of the sea. Behind them are the Egyptians, and there is nowhere for them to go. They are desperate. They are hopeless. They start screaming and crying. They're yelling at Moshe and at God himself. There weren't enough graves in Egypt that you couldn't have just let us die there. You had to bring us all the way out to the desert to kill us. They're crying. They're desperate. They're literally screaming to the point that Moshe has to tell them to be quiet. They are feeling hopeless and helpless. And we know, of course, what happens. God reverses the laws of nature, something he does so sparingly. He splits the sea, and the Jewish people make their way onto the other side. Now, whether we understand the splitting of the sea to be that it happens all at once, like it did in the movies, whether you saw the Ten Commandments version or the animated version, it was a big split. Or perhaps according to some of the commentaries who say that as the Jewish people were walking through, the water was literally splitting one step in front of them as they went. Either way, you can imagine that as the Jewish people went through the sea, they are thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, please let it continue to split, or please let it stay like this, right? Please let the water not come crashing down. Please, 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 please. They are with a prayer on their lips the entire time they're crossing. And they finally make it to the other side. And as we read yesterday, they are in ecstatic celebration over having been saved from their enemy. They see their enemies drowned in the sea, and they respond in this spontaneous, beautiful song, one that has become part of our daily prayers as Yashir, that we say daily. And the Torah tells us that the Jewish people sang this song. And then Miriam HaNeviah, Miriam, the sister of Moshe and the sister of Aharon, the prophet HaNeviah, she leads the women. She grabs her drum in her hand, and all of the women follow her. She leads them, Bitupim uvim cholot. She leads them, and they are following her, Bitupim uvim cholot. Now, the typical translation of that is with drums and with, some say tambourines. Many of the commentaries say with drums and with dances. Now, our sages have a beautiful insight that I think is quite well known, which is that where in the world did the women get these instruments from? They were in the middle of nowhere. How did this happen? And as we said, they have this famous insight that they share. This tells us that Jewish women never lose hope, because when they were packing for this journey, that they knew was coming, but they didn't know exactly when it was coming. And when they were throwing all their belongings together and they were packing the snack that this child likes and the meal that this one likes, and trying to remember which things they needed to take and what they could afford to leave behind. And of course, you know, the extra underwear and the extra drinks and all the extra things that we pack when we're taking our family on a journey. But they also packed instruments because they expected that there would be some kind of grand celebration. They were going to need to sing. And so they brought their instruments. And that is a beautiful testimony to the power and the hope of Jewish women. But I want to add to our understanding of that idea just a little bit. The Talmud in Masechet Tanit says that the idea of a machol, betupim uvim cholot, that a machol is not just a regular dance. It's not a solo performance, and it's not the dance that is performed by a duo. It's not even a line dance. A machol, says the Talmud, is a circle dance. A machol is a dance where people put their arms around each other, or they clasp each other's hands, and they move together in a circle. And so what the Torah is telling us is that the women didn't just sing. The men also sang. The women didn't just sing. They sang and they danced. And they didn't just dance. They danced together. They danced holding each other's hands with their arms around each other in celebration and in joy. That already creates such a beautiful, moving picture of what this scene must have been. But I have to say, I don't know if it's the last few months or the last few years of life that have taught me to look at this story just a little bit differently. And as we have said in a number of the classes that we've had in our opportunities to study together, which I cherished so much, we have said that as our lives change, we tend to filter the stories that we've known for many years. We just tend to understand them and see them a little bit differently. Well, let me tell you that this story to me now is just not as simple as it always used to be. I used to think, much like in the movies, I used to think that the Jewish people crossed the sea, they broke out into spontaneous song. I have to admit that I always thought it was sort of like a la High School Musical or something like that. And I just assumed that they were ecstatic, that they were overflowing with joy, with jubilation, total like unabashed celebration. But recently I've come to think that this scene might have looked a little bit differently. And the fact that the women were dancing in circles kind of fits in this new perspective that I have. And that is when the women were dancing, I started to picture them not just jumping up and down in total unabashed joy, but I started to picture them holding each other, like holding each other up, holding each other together, supporting each other, encouraging each other. Now, where would I get that from, right? They were just saved from their enemy. Why would they need to strengthen and support and encourage each other? Well, I started to think a little bit more about what that experience must have been like. And I realized two things. Number one, they may have made it to the other side, thank God. But oh my gosh, what a trauma they had just been through. They were almost slaughtered on the shore, or they thought they were going to drown in the sea. They'd just been through decades and decades of slavery, the plagues, not knowing when they were going to be freed, if they were going to be freed, what the whole thing was going to look like. And now they finally made it to the other side. And maybe for the first time in a very long time, they finally exhale. And when you realize what we just have been through, oh my gosh, of course we're happy. But as many of you, I'm sure, have experienced in your lives, sometimes that moment where you exhale to celebrate or enjoy something is also a moment of tremendous emotion. It's so overwhelming. And so I started to think that maybe it wasn't so simple, their emotional reaction after they got through the Yam Suf, after they got through the sea. And then I realized something else. And I saw this, I think Sivan Rahav Meir quoted this earlier this week. When the women and the men got to the other side, here they were, they escaped their enemy, thank God. But when they got to the other side, there was no promised land. They were in no man's land. They were in the middle of nowhere. They didn't know where they were. We think they know where they were headed, but my goodness, they don't even know how long we know how long it's going to take them to get there, but they have no idea. And so they're looking around and they're thinking, wow, we made it, but oh my gosh, there's so much more to go. We don't even know what's going to happen today. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And maybe part of their celebration, part of their dancing, part of their singing in gratitude to Hashem for the tremendous miracle that he gave them was also a recognition that there was still a pretty long road ahead, and they were going to have to fortify each other and encourage each other and support each other in order to make it through the next phase of what we know is eventually going to be the redemption, but it is a long ways away. It feels so far away at that moment. The Jewish women have a long history, as we said before, of being the torchbearers and the personification of hope, those that bring light into the world. You don't have to look deeply into Jewish history to see the stories about how they conducted themselves in Egypt, never losing hope, wanting to continue to the Jewish people even when it didn't seem so logical, not being involved in some of the negative behaviors that the Jewish people engaged in during the desert because they had their eye on the ball. They knew that long term, this was going to work out and that Moshe would come back, so there was no need to serve a golden calf, and that God had promised us the beautiful land, so there was no need to believe in the report of the spies, that the women held on to hope, they held on to positivity. That's who Jewish women are. That's who Jewish women are. And one of the ideas that I think really comes across when you think about the idea of Jewish women in a circle is that a circle by definition means that maybe not at all of our simchas, if you could remember back to when they were, they're not always so perfectly round and, evenly spaced. But if you could think about what a circle really represents, and what the Talmud in Tanya is actually referring to is the fact that God one day is going to be sitting in the center of a circle, and all of the righteous people are going to be dancing in circles around him. Now, I don't know what that means, but what I do know is that the idea of women dancing in a circle, of people dancing in a circle, means that they are there to support each other, but they are also all there surrounding the same thing. And the Jewish women for generations and generations have encircled Jewish tradition. They have kept tradition. They have kept Jewish values intact. We have kept our what we call our Mesorah, right? Our legacy, our Jewish traditions, the Jewish law. And we have committed ourselves to keeping the links in the chain together. One of the ways that women have chosen to do that is by ensuring that there is sanctity, that there is holiness in our lives and in our homes. And Jewish women are uniquely suited to do this in tremendous capacity for connecting to each other, as Basi mentioned, right? The way that we connect to other people can play a huge role. Our ability to love each other, to love ourselves, right? There is something so profound about that. But in particular, what I, of course, want to address tonight is the idea that while there are so many ways for a person to bring sanctity and holiness into their lives and into their home, as we have spoken about and as we have been trying to do, especially during these last 10 months, where we are trying to have as many opportunities for us to connect with each other, to study together, to enjoy each other's company, even if it's virtual. There are many, many ways that we can help each other, reach out to each other, to bring holiness, to bring sanctity, to bring closeness into our lives. But one of the ways that Jewish women have been able to do this for thousands of years is in their adherence and their observance to the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha, what we translate as the laws of family purity, sometimes better known as the laws of mikvah or the laws of nida. These are essentially the laws that govern the way a Jewish husband and wife are in conduct, I should say, with each other all throughout their married years together. And this area of Jewish law has been an area that women have grasped onto in all different ways and on all different levels, but that's something that women have grabbed onto for generation and generation and generation. The laws themselves haven't changed, but it seems that the needs of Jewish women have very much changed, right? The needs of the world have changed. And so, of course, the needs in our community have changed. And so while our commitment to observing Jewish law to the best of our ability has not changed, sometimes the kind of support that we need, sometimes the kind of guidance that we need, that may have shifted and that may have changed. And as Shira mentioned, this is something that I am particularly passionate about in an effort to strengthen our community, in an effort to strengthen the women of our community in particular. I enrolled in the program offered by Nishmat, which many of you have heard about, where we studied together with a group of women. I was actually in a cohort with Basi's daughter-in-law, who is wonderful. And you just love when you see a good daughter-in-law matched up with a great mother-in-law. That's the best that it can get. So completing this program was something that I did. I did it because I was excited to study and I was excited to learn the laws on a different level. But the real reason I did it was in order to be able to be here in a different way for the women of our community than I had been able to be before. It was in recognition of the fact that the laws of family purity, which involve the most intimate parts of a woman's body and a woman's life and her relationships, that is something that might just be more suited, more comfortable, as Shira mentioned, to discuss with another woman. And I wanted to be able to be available in that way for the women of our community, not just for the women of TBDJ, although of course they have a special place in my heart, but for the women of the entire Montreal Jewish community and the surrounding areas. I just want to share with you, what does that mean that I want to be here for the women of our community? Because some of you might be wondering, well, what does that look like? So I think it might be helpful if I share with you some of the questions, some of the situations that have come up over the last year or so. It has basically, in a nutshell, we have worked together to navigate the challenges of using the mikvah during COVID, which has been significant, as you all know, given what has gone on in Montreal and in other places as well, but the challenges that we faced in the use of the mikvah, making sure that things were being done properly and safely, ensuring that women felt comfortable, and then navigating situations for women who were more anxious, women who were having a difficult time, struggling with the idea of going to the mikvah. We have spoken about issues related to fertility and to infertility, issues that have come up in the beginnings of pregnancies and issues that have come up related to miscarriage. We have discussed issues related all different types of birth control, literally every type. We have talked about, unfortunately, difficult issues along the lines of miscarriage and infertility and secondary infertility. We have faced medical diagnoses, procedures, medical procedures. We have talked about issues that come up as a woman's body is changing, whether it's because she has just given birth, or because she is nursing, or because she's perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal. All of those things, the entire gamut of a woman's experience and everything in between are parts of a woman's life that are my privilege to be able to share with you, to hold your hand, to see how I can support you, to see how I can help you. If there are areas related to Jewish law as it intersects with Jewish law. So that is why I'm here for. If it's because you are needing some support, some help, some guidance, because maybe you thought your whole life you were going to keep this area of Jewish law, and now you're finding it a lot harder than you thought. Or maybe you never thought you were going to keep these laws, but you're realizing that maybe this is something you want to investigate a little bit further. This area of Jewish law, like many, has so many details. It is also, while it's complicated, it is also not black and white. There is so much room for discussion. There is so much room for questions. I have been beyond blessed to have developed a relationship with a posek, a rabbinic authority in New York by the name of Rabbi Kenneth Alman, who has been a gift. So many women that I have been able to help and guide to navigate some very, very difficult and challenging situations, some of them with very happy endings. Rabbi Alman has been guiding and supporting me as I have been guiding and supporting you. And I pray that he should continue to have good health and strength so he can continue to guide us. So in those ways, I really want to be here for you. For the women who this is not part of their lives at this moment, whether it's because they're past that age or because they're not yet at that age, or it's not relevant at this stage in your life, I want you to know that we very much want to be here for you as well. I want to continue to study with you. And I specifically want you to know that when you log into classes and we have an opportunity to learn together, whether you're teaching me or I'm teaching you, we're learning together, that I so value the perspective that you bring. And I think watching the way some of the just a little bit older members of our community have handled themselves over the last 10 months has been nothing short of inspiring. It has been hard. It has been so hard, as have most of the things for the last 10 months, but it has been so energizing and inspiring to see how you have continued to manage and persevere, to keep your perspective, all the while not being able, many of you, to spend time with your children or grandchildren, to not go about your daily lives like you're used to. It has just been an incredible thing to watch. And I really sincerely hope you will continue to take advantage of any learning opportunities and any other opportunities to connect with myself, of course, with my husband as well. We really want to be here for you. And if there are opportunities that you're looking for that we have not thought of, please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out, because we are really here for you. We are here for you. We want to be here for you. And what I'm picturing, what I'm envisioning, God willing, at the end of all of this craziness are circles, lots and lots of circles of all of us holding each other, clasping each other's hands, putting our arms around each other once again, with not worrying about sanitizer and not worrying about masks and not counting how many people are in the building, welcoming everyone, putting our arms around each other dancing in celebration about what we have survived, knowing that there is probably still a road ahead of us, but looking back and recognizing how far we've come, realizing that we come from a very long line of strong Jewish women who have never lost hope and who have realized that we are the present, but we are also the future. And so I am so looking forward to the day when we can all be together again, putting our arms around each other, dancing, keeping our center strong, but most importantly, being there for each other. And I'm so grateful to you all for taking the time this evening to join us. God willing, we should be together in person soon. But until then, I look forward to being in touch with all of you. I want to thank again, Basi, for sharing such beautiful words with us. She has stuck around, which I so appreciate, so she can be there. And she sincerely means that she wants to hear your questions and she wants to guide us and help us because she cares so deeply for not just her clients, but I can see for everyone that she shares her wisdom with. So again, just a thank you to all of you for giving up part of your evening to be with us tonight. A huge thank you to Shira for her incredible amount of effort, the amount of time she has invested in making not just tonight's program, but the myriad of learning opportunities, social programs to make sure that there's something available for everyone, whether you like to bake or whether you like to eat or a little bit of both, or if you like to learn, if you want to, study more on a specific topic. She has come up with just an amazing array of opportunities for all of us. A very special thank you as well to the women who were involved in preparing the bags for tonight. And lastly, I just want to share, again, for those of you who are not sure if the fact that I'm a Yotzet Halacha is relevant at all to you, if you've asked me questions, I'm so grateful, and please don't apologize for reaching out. I'm always happy to hear from you. And if you're not sure if I have anything to help you with, if you have no idea what these laws are, and if you're interested in finding out more, I would love to hear from you. And that's why I'm here. So I wish you all a wonderful evening. Thank you. We're going to stick around now, I think, for some questions.
Thank you so much, Rifki. That was beautiful and inspiring as always. And I can tell you all, I know she really means it when she says there is no bad question and you are never bothering her, because I would definitely be one of those people, but she doesn't say it. I think we can move on with the questions if Talia, you want to select a few to ask Basi or Rifki.
Yes, thank you so much for this amazing evening. I've just been keeping an eye on the chat, and I see that we have a question about when people in our lives are looking to talk, to maybe get some emotional support, but you might be not in the mood for that conversation. You might be really tired. How do you not offend them? How do you sort of, honor that?
I guess that question's for me. So I'll take that question. I think that right now there has to be a lot of self-protection right now. And even if you've been the best friend ever and you were the go-to, right now, I think there's been an understanding for yourself that you need to protect yourself in order so that you can care for yourself and also really care for the people that live in your home. And I think it is okay to say to somebody, I feel for you. I have a lot going on at home that right now I don't have what you need right this moment to help you. And I think that right now people can hear that. They do understand that everyone's life is so challenging right now that everyone really does understand it's not just about them. So I think that is okay to say, and actually I think it's safer to say that to someone that you don't have it in you right now because of what's going on. You don't have to go into detail what's going on in your own home, than to pretend or think that you can help them when you just don't really have it in you. It is better to tell them the truth. I have found that, especially right now. Tell someone the truth that you're not available right now. I think they may be a little hurt, but it is better than telling that you're available and not be available to them. So.
Thank you. And then I see we have a couple of questions. I imagine they could be for Rivki, but I'll just leave them open. Asking about transmission in mikveh? How do you ensure safety? Have there been cases of transmission via mikveh?
Okay, that's a really great question. I'm familiar with the practices that are being used in the local mikvahs, primarily Côte St. Luc and the one on Bates, the local mikvah, the two of the local mikvahs. There are many others. And I can tell you that I feel very comfortable with the protocols that they have in place as far as sanitizing. They're being very careful about distancing and making sure that women are in and out in literally under 10 minutes. There have been no cases that I am aware of that have been traced to a mikvah. There were studies done in Israel, and they came away with very solid data that the mikvah had not been a point of transmission, which was really reassuring, I think, for many people. Obviously, at the beginning of the pandemic, where nobody knew anything, there was a tremendous amount of fear around mikvah because there was a tremendous amount of fear about walking outside of our home. So everything seemed overwhelming and scary. And while certainly things are still overwhelming and scary, we do have a lot more information than we did before. I'm happy to answer any more detailed questions. The one other thing I'll mention that is a pretty general response that has been given by experts is that mikvah waters, when properly maintained, which they are in our local mikvahs, have either bromine or chlorine levels that are known without question to eliminate the virus. So even if a person who doesn't realize that they would be carrying something, because obviously you go through a checklist before you come and they ask you lots of questions and nobody with symptoms would dare go to the mikvah. But if someone were to slip through and end up in the mikvah who shouldn't be there, really, we're as guaranteed for as we are anywhere else these days. Which is to say nothing is perfect, but that we are, thank God, we are in a situation where the risk is fairly low. So that is something to be very grateful for. I do just want to mention one thing that I don't know why I forgot to say this, but one area of being a U.S. halacha, and I wasn't using my notes, and that's what happens when you don't use your notes. But one area of being a U.S. halacha that is something I'm super passionate about and I feel strongly about is in supporting women in areas in their intimate relationship with their husband and their physical relationship with their husband. So while I'm a big believer in not telling people that keeping the laws of family, it is not a magic potion and it is not a guarantee for a perfect marriage or for the best sexual relationship you could possibly have. It is not a magic potion. It's not a guarantee. It is, however, comes part and parcel with developing a strong relationship in all ways. And where a couple struggles or where a woman is struggling in areas of intimacy and in sexuality, then that is definitely something that she should be getting help and support for. And that was part of our training. And I just apologize that I forgot to mention it. It was definitely not intentional. So just going to throw that out there. Okay, next question. Sorry.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much. We have a question for Basi. I saw this come into the chat. Any recommendations for rumination if you find yourself circling back to unproductive thoughts? What do you do?
Well, I think that it depends on how much of your time that's going on and how much it's interfering with your life. I'm a big believer in people seeking out professional help. Thoughts that
I'm so sorry. I'm going to stop you. Your mic is sort of cutting in and out. Could there be anything covering the microphone maybe?
I don't think so. Okay.
It was so good for most of your presentation.
So now it's...
Oh, it was good for a second.
Okay, unmuted and muted, thinking maybe that might help. Is this better? Is it better?
I think right now it's better.
Now it's better. Okay. Okay. I think I said I'm a big believer in people seeking out professional medical help. It is amazing what people can do who are professionals to help. And if you have thoughts that you just, that you're in a circle, that they keep coming back, it's actually, I used to call it thought regurgitation. You keep coming back to that thought and back to that thought and back to that thought, and it's really interfering with your life, then I think seeing a professional help, getting some help can really make a difference. And especially during this time, people should really not be hesitant at all to seek out help. It's out there and it's available. So that's what I would say.
I think we've probably gone over our time. So I think that's all the questions we'll have time for. But I know that Bossy posted her email. And if anyone wants to reach out about any thoughts on what she said, I'm sure she would appreciate it. And I thank you all again so much for coming and joining this program. It was so informative and so great. I know I feel so much better already. And it was so great to hear from Rifki about what she does. So thank you so much. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. Bye, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you, Rifki. Thank you, Shira. Thank you, Bossy.
Thank you all so much for being here. So great.
Amazing program. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone go drink water.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Time to go to sleep.
I thought you were going to say go drink wine. That's how I know I still need this lesson.